I now call this meeting of the Amateur Detective Club to order. I'm Melissa Meli, the spy.
I'm Tyler Riley, cop and a half.
And I'm Tristan Miller. Shoot. What did we decide on?
We didn't
Nothing.
decide
We
on
decided
it.
on
The
something.
nameless detective. Ooh. The cop with no name.
The cop with no name. Today's show is brought to you by Audible. Audible is offering our listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. Just go to audibletrial.com/adcpod and browse the unmatched selection of audio programs. Download a free download a title free and start listening. It's that easy. Go to audibletrial.com/adcpod.
In your defense, Melissa, that specific wording has always been stupid to me. Like, that's not how anyone speaks.
Should we recommend the book series from which the movie that we're watching is based off of?
I
Sure.
recommend definitely reading it. I don't know who does the audiobook version of it. I'd be curious to find that out. And
You should go find out. Who's the author?
James Patterson. And I'm looking it
I'll
up.
put it in.
Of course.
Oh, Tyler, you got it great.
So it is Michael Kramer, who does the narration of Kiss the Girls on Audible, who has a 4.6 out of 5-star rating. So,
Oh, okay.
Oh, that's pretty good.
I'm gonna
People
look
are hard to
something
please.
up again real quick here. Kiss the Girls.
He savored a thought. My real life is about to begin.
Oh, he's got a nice
Really want
voice.
to do
Very
this?
soothing.
Yes, I am.
Oh.
Deeply sensual.
That's
interesting that they picked who I believe to be a white male to narrate this book.
Yeah. Funny.
yeah. It feels like it should.
I mean, I'm not anti it because he definitely has the tone down. It's just interesting.
Could you imagine if it was Morgan Freeman? That'd be so fun.
But it does open up with the narration of the serial killer that we come to know in
Correct.
this book.
Right.
Of talking about who his first love, and it's very creepy. I think should we do it now? We should do a content warning. This is a big warning for anyone who is more than normally disturbed, as we all are.
Yeah.
But if you can't take any media with sexual assault and that sort of thing in it, maybe don't listen to this one. It's pretty disturbing.
Yeah, this film is rated R, and appropriately so.
The film opens up.
There's a narration of our killer, who we learn has nicknamed himself Casanova, talking about the first women that he loved. And he basically tells us in this narration that he was watching from inside their homes these two sisters, and eventually, revealed himself to them.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, of course, very disturbing. And then we get a cut to our detective, Alex Cross, boxing.
Yeah,
Teaching
coaching. Boxing. Are they coaches? Are they trainers?
Yeah.
They're coaches.
Yeah.
Okay, he's coaching
I think so.
boxing.
Little
These little boys at this gym, and then he receives a phone call
On his Motorola Razor.
Yeah, this movie was made in 1997, by the way.
He has a beeper.
Sure. Yes. And I did see this movie before.
Oh.
Same.
When I was quite a bit younger.
Oh.
And I don't know how I was allowed to. But I suppose I saw it when I was a teenager. Yeah. I was a pretty mature teenager. So I guess it was fine.
Same. Yeah, I read the books and watched the films while in high school.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't read the books, but I did see this movie before. And I'm pretty sure I was in high school.
I've never heard of this series at all. This is my first experience.
Okay.
With these characters.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
But we...
all right.
Alex goes home to find his sister at his house, along with... I believe she's referred to as Nana Mom, but we don't really get to see much of Nana Cross in this particular film. But the family is there because Alex Cross's niece, Naomi, a college student, was reported missing. And it is believed that her going missing is linked to this man that they have been trying to catch for several months down in Durham, North Carolina.
Yeah. There are several missing young women, like late teens, early 20s. Yeah. All exceptionally talented and, of course, pretty women. And other than that, there does not appear to be any sort of victim profile. Like, this person does not discriminate based on, hair color, race, anything like that. Which is often the case with serial killers. This guy wants these young women who are extremely talented and strong-willed is kind of the profile that we are given.
Yeah.
Quickly, before we go to the residence of what is the character's name? I didn't catch it. The niece's family, Naomi's family. Because he's
the Crosses.
Yeah. The Crosses. Okay. They do all have the same name. Yeah. So before Alex Cross goes to them, he does go to a crime scene where there's a domestic violence survivor who appears to have killed her husband in self-defense, and she's very distressed and has a gun in her mouth, and he is you see him talk her out of shooting herself. And you see his like really good manner with her and his persuasion, and kind of get a sense of what he does
with that soothing voice.
Yes, that Morgan Freeman voice, because I don't think we've mentioned it's Morgan Freeman. Yes.
Yeah. A lot of really famous actors in this movie playing bit parts also. It's very... But this is a really great scene regarding narrative, to show that he's like really good at his job, and he has this special thing of like being able to talk folks down and really work that angle of stuff. He does have a way about him, and that this really established that, which I thought it's a very strong scene. Yeah, because he also like figures out what's going on immediately, quickly.
And it's also not very long. And they don't... It's not like... They don't make it relevant to the rest of the film in a way that makes sense. That was a terrible thing I just tried to explain. But... terrible explanation. But what I mean is, it was like... It's a totally standalone scene. And they don't come back to it because they don't need to. Like, it wraps itself up. Yeah. Really neatly. Yeah. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. But it also has the theme of the rest of the film of, like, violence against women. And so, like, thematically, you can see that he's, like, used to deling with this sort of thing also.
And he's, what, a forensic psychologist? Correct. Is that what he... Yes.
Yes.
He's a mind hunter, if anyone watches that show, which is great. But, yes. So, after we learn that his niece, Naomi, is missing... we get a cut to this faceless man leading this woman, this terrified young woman, through the woods. And he's saying, basically, like, you broke your promise. Do you love me? And she tries to convince him that he, in her desperation.
That she'll do better next time.
What was that, Tristan?
That she'll do better next time and that sort of thing.
And then, unfortunately, we get we find out that basically the next day we're going to the crime scene where she has been discovered murdered. And we have a couple detectives, and one of them is
Detective Dave. Okay.
Harry.
Detective Davy Sykes and Detective Nick Ruskin, who... Yes. Before we meet them, Alex has made his way from DC to Durham to try and speak to the captain there to try to get on the case in some way. Because he has very high personal stakes. And they let him wait in the waiting room for 2 hours, and he decides that he's just going to go in by himself and get the answers that he needs. And that's when he's introduced to Sykes and Ruskin.
I would also like to point out two things before we get into it. Sure. Number one, the FBI is involved with this. It's not just local police. So it's very high stakes because it's it's a serial thing, so it's not local police force just doesn't cut it. And then also, Durham, North Carolina is a really lovely city. Highly recommend going and visiting there.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, it's really nice. They have a decent theater scene, a lot of great Waffle Houses.
But we learned from Nick Ruskin that Naomi is the latest young woman to have been captured.
And Nick Ruskin, I have to say, is played by Cary Elwes. Is that how you pronounce his last name?
Elwes.
So soon after Cross arrives, he, along with Ruskin and Sykes, goes to find that woman that we talked about earlier who was led through the woods. She is found bound to a tree. And it just...
In a...
Yeah, it's...
In a really weird way.
Yeah, her hands are tied behind her back around the tree, and there's a clump of hair that they find behind the tree as well. And it seems that she was not drugged, or she wasn't unconscious when she was wrapped around. She was just kind of just left there.
Yeah. So they determined that she her attacker had cut off her hair, and also the knots that he made were just ridiculous. There was no real order to it. They're kind of looking around the scene, trying to make heads or tails of what's going on there, and of course wanting to figure out how to
it's the woman that we saw before. It's not Naomi, as Alex was very nervous about leading up to it.
Right.
When he's there, on at the crime scene, he's asking Ruskin and Sykes more about what they know of this man and what they know of the victim that they're about to go see. And he's trying to be professional, but also try to steer the conversation so they might hint as to whether it's his niece or not.
Yeah. And while I totally understand what he's doing and respect it, it's generally a pretty terrible idea to be extremely emotionally involved with a case that you're investigating. But that's the drama in the story. Yeah. That's one of the things. There's a few things in this that are very highly fictionalized, and I will probably make some comparisons to some real life serial killers at some point in this, but there are some things in this that are just so incredibly bonkers that they never allow that to happen, just mostly with the law enforcement involvement.
Sure.
Yeah.
And not that bonkers things don't happen in real life. We have a cut to Ashley Judd, who is named Kate in this one, and she's a surgeon, and she is taking care of a young woman, a teenager, I think, who I forget, it's some ridiculous avoidable accident that she was put in danger, but she's in a pretty bad coma, and she has to talk to the family. But you can tell from this interaction with the family, and also even doing the surgery, that Dr. Kate cares a lot about her patients and really tries to do the best job that she possibly can.
Yeah, and the family gets very upset, and then we smash cut to her also boxing.
Yes.
Yeah, which is a fun edit. They, like, push in on her face, and then they match the frame exactly of her hitting that bag.
Yeah. Yeah.
Going at it.
Yeah.
But no, she loves the punch.
She's got to blow off that steam somehow. But then we cut back to the investigation, and they're talking about the women, and I think this is when they are really giving Alex Cross the profile of who they're looking at. And then you get a cut back to our Dr. Kate, and she goes home, and we hear the same voiceover we heard at the beginning, and also the voice of the faceless man who murdered the poor woman on the tree. And he is in Dr. Kate's house. And he takes her.
It's a really tough scene to watch.
Yeah.
It happens, upsetting. She's like in bed, like it's at night. There are like trees by her house, so she like, when she hears like noise, like she just assumes that it's something happening outside, but like it keeps nagging at her.
What gives it away is the fact that she goes out of her room and then back into her room, and then there's a coat hanger swishing on her closet door, meaning like that door was just moved, and then she gets grabbed. And she very resourcefully breaks away from this person because she does box and she's athletic. In that boxing scene, we do see that she's like pretty jacked. Yeah. And she runs down the stairs. She's doing a decent job of getting away. And then this person has put her fish tank at the bottom of the stairs. And she crashes into this. Yeah. And it was like one of those moments of like, if this was a different movie, that would be the funniest thing in the world. Like, if this was like Home Alone, like, it would be hysterical. But under these circumstances, like with the fish on the floor, it was deeply disturbing. They did a very effective job, the filmmakers, with that. Because, like, they cut to after she's, like, fallen down, the fish flopping on the floor. And then, there's that nice parallel of them being helpless and her being helpless.
Yeah. Absolutely. So then we get after we see her being taken, we see Alex Cross looking around at her niece's stuff, at his niece's belongings, and he pulls out some photographs and sees a young man in them, and then I think he goes to find that young man to have a chat with him, her boyfriend, clearly. So he tries to get some information out of him. And I think what they kind of come to is that her violin was not found at her home.
Right.
And Alex Cross is trying to figure out, like, why would that be? And her boyfriend's like, I don't know, it's not here either. Like, that violin is nowhere to be found either.
And he makes it a point to be like, she played it here very often, but she always took it home. Like, it was always, like, wherever she was. And he also alludes to the fact that, he has been harassed by the police several times over this incident. Which I appreciated because we see the profile, and we, as the audience, know the profile, and the fact that he constantly is being harassed, like, speaks volumes. Yeah. Then we have Kate waking up where she's being held by who we believe to be Casanova at this point.
And he's got candles everywhere, and it's like this castle-looking place with no... Yeah, it's a little Phantom of the Opera-y.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Très dramatique.
yes, indeed. And, you know, there's stone walls and candelabras, and he, like... Yeah, go ahead, Tristan.
Can I tell you, I have performed at a comedy club, or a venue, rather, that did look exactly like this room.
Okay. So there's
That's the...
a comedy club that looks like a castle dungeon?
Yeah, it's the sister bar to the Jekyll and Hyde Club. It's called the Slaughtered Lamb, and they have a basement downstairs, and it looks almost exactly like this place.
Oh, no, yeah, I've been there. That's true.
Absolutely wonky. But yeah. That's all. Like, when I saw this stuff, I was like, yes. I can smell the mildew.
Yeah. Definitely. But, like, there's a bed.
The chief concern is black mold, clearly.
Yeah. She's in a bed, and there's, like, a nightstand next to her, but she's also bound, and he, like, brought some of her clothes, and it's very upsetting, and, like, he wants her to love him, but also, you know, is very violent with her if she doesn't do everything he wants. But you also see or hear basically this conversation between him and another person. He's like sending a picture of her to this other man on the computer, you know, and saying, hey, look at this one, isn't she nice? And it's gross and it sucks. But he says he's got a lot of rules, and one of the rules is that she's not supposed to make a sound or like call out for help. But then we get a cut to a swimming pool, and Dr. Cross is doing a little investigation, and I completely forget what the scene is. I'm sure it's not.
Yeah, he goes, and there's a bunch of people doing laps, one of which is a professor at the college that Naomi attended, and he wants to talk to him because he has a reputation of being very close with a lot of his younger female students.
That's what it is.
He's a nasty old man, and they have a conversation in the locker room.
Right.
And he's basically like, yeah, I don't know what you've heard, but whatever. And he was like, it must be very difficult for you in this situation. And he's like, well, what about Naomi? And he's like, I suppose both of you.
Yeah.
Which is very curt and weird. He's not a pleasant man.
He's a creepy creep. We then get a cut back to Kate, and Kate is breaking the rules already. She's calling out, and
yeah,
if she's calling out, and through the walls, she is able to communicate with just a ton of other women that are being held there.
Yeah,
like 10, maybe.
Yeah, it's like an I Am Spartacus moment.
Yeah,
like. There's a lot of ladies in these in similar jail cells to her, because like it's very castle like, but it is also like there's a wooden door and it has like a slot for you to talk to people.
Yeah. And one of the people who calls out to her is Naomi Cross.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And they're all like, the initial thing is like, don't call out, he'll kill you.
Yeah.
Then does it lead directly into him coming and talking to her, or is there a scene in between?
There is a scene in between. It's an Alex Cross scene, and I cannot, for my life, remember what happens in it.
It's him looking over like different theories from what he has learned about the criminal's MO. You know, he's making notes. I believe that's when we are like more formally. No, Detective Sampson comes again later. But he is working at his desk, making his notes, and then he receives a note slipped under his hotel door.
Okay.
He makes a call to his family, to his sister or sister-in-law, and then again, something else like slides under the door that he goes back to, and it's a photograph of a woman posed, and it's signed by Casanova. He then opens the door, like is trying to, track down and chase the killer in this hotel. Like he runs into like different patrons, freaks them all out. Yeah, he has a gun out, and he knows that it's either Casanova or someone who has connections to Casanova is in this hotel, knows where he is staying.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the stakes, stakes have gone up. And then I believe Sykes is the one that comes to the hotel to talk to him. It's Sykes and Ruskin, because Ruskin starts talking about the penmanship on the note and like how nice it is.
Right. Okay. Yeah. That's right. Then it does cut back to Kate, and Casanova is...
before we move on, they go back to like the note and the photograph, and like they start talking about how the woman is posed in the photograph and how that might inform either the work that is inspiring who he's capturing, and what that possible like why he's posing them in these different ways.
Okay. Yes. So more psychological profile.
Yeah, that's a much better way to say what I said.
No. Just to sum up, you gave more detail. Yeah. So yes, we go back to Kate, and Casanova has heard her calling out, and he struggles with her, and
she's shadowboxing when we see her next.
Oh.
Yeah, and I also wanted to mention something.
Yes.
When she was tied to the bed, he did also drug her with something. He injected something into her arm.
Right. Yes.
Which, yeah. But yes, in this scene, she's shadowboxing, right? And I don't remember what happened.
It's leading into what Melissa was about to bring up, but we see that she is well.
Okay.
She's cognizant, and she is like in, fighting shape at this point. And I think she starts choking on a sandwich or something.
Yeah, he's brought her food, and then clearly the food has something in it to make her ill. She vomits.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And then he comes in to inject another dose of whatever
because the food poisoning or whatever was like because she broke the rule.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he's to drug her, and does he succeeds in doing it?
Yeah, but she is still... She realizes it, though. And...
Oh, for sure.
They have a struggle. And she just starts...
She punches him right in the face, which is dope.
Yeah. And she starts running after she can get away from him. And she is able to run out the door, run out of the complex. She sees light. And she then is in the woods and runs like hell. And he catches up to her. And she is at, like, a crossroads where she can either jump off of a very, very high cliff, or so she does decide to instead of be captured again, jump off of the very high cliff into a body of water, thankfully. And boy, does she make the right decision. Like, it's one of the hardest things I could possibly ever think of to negotiate. And if you've listened to the podcast, y'all know I like true crime, and that I listen to a lot of it, and that a lot of the reason that women in particular, but anyone listens to intakes a lot of true crime is because there's kind of a like, what can I learn about this that'll help me in case I ever find myself in this situation. And one of the things that I have figured out, you know, over and over again is do not cooperate, get away as soon as you can. It's not a complete hard and fast rule, but like, do not go to a different location. Do not let yourself be taken out. Never get in a car. Even if the guy has a gun to your head, he's probably going to kill you anyway. So you're better off trying to fight. In most circumstances. But it's very rare that, like, if you go with them, it's going to go well, honestly. So you might as well jump off the cliff and take your chances with that, because...
Yeah.
And it sounds really morbid, but it is. But at the same time, like, yeah, don't let yourself... I mean, as much as you can. And this is not in any way to try to blame someone who isn't able to fight back, because it's scary, and I don't know that I could in that situation. Like, you try to do the best you can to negotiate, like, how am I going to get out of this? And it's a very hard thing to do what she did. But she jumps off the cliff and into the water, and then she gets rescued.
Yeah, by two young boys that happen to be fishing in the area.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And is the next scene in the hospital then?
I think it is in the hospital. Like, it's like a hospital conference room where, like, the FBI is convening with the doctor. That is... That's Kate's doctor at the hospital.
He convinces the doctor, who is very dutifully trying to convince him to leave poor Ashley Judd alone because she's been through enough. But Alex Cross is like, listen, I have some personal stake in this. Could you please just let me talk to her? Yeah. And she's like, all right. Yeah. Because she doesn't have a heart of stone.
And I think it also has to do with the fact that he's also a doctor and also, you know, knows to be sensitive because of the nature, like, of being a psychologist.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. And
he does wake her up. I'm so sorry. But he does wake her up by touching her on the head.
Yeah. Which is kind of, it's very... He does that a couple of times. That's like his go-to move. He, like, obviously is... Like, he does it even with the first woman, I believe, that we see him interact with. He's a very, like, he's clearly trying to... He does it with, his I suppose, sister.
His sister or sister-in-law, Vicky Cross.
Whoever is Naomi's mother.
Right. He's a face toucher.
He's a face toucher, and I understand what he's doing, but it does come across as pretty weird.
He's doing it in a comforting way. It's just like, you know, especially if you don't know a woman. Like, don't do that.
But, or anybody. He also doesn't wake her up that way. She's, like, having, trouble. Like, she's, like, shifting around in her sleep. Like, something is bothering her, and he touches her head. Because she wakes up by herself in the morning. Because he ends up finding out that... He ends up working with the doctor to find out what she was injected with. And he was the one that, like, figures out that it's, like... I forget what... Began with an S, I think. Cistrol or something like that. I don't remember exactly.
Yeah.
But he...
And it basically does this...
I was just going to say, but he basically finds, like, the way to counteract that drug without damaging her system even more, because whatever is in her system is systematically shutting her body down.
It's an overdose of a benzoid, and normally benzoids show up in blood and urine, but this one doesn't for some reason.
Yeah, exactly.
But also she's in, like, the doctor says she's in, like, post-traumatic shock, and Cross is basically like, I don't think so, I think she's been drugged, and she's like, no, there's nothing showing up, and then... He goes and to find this out, he uses a book, which is cool. I thought that was really, like, he's like, do you have this whatever guide?
Yes.
And he goes through all the medications. And I was like, that's fascinating.
This big old book.
I know, like, this was made, like, 25 years ago or whatever, but, like, how quickly things have changed. I was just like, oh, neat. A book in a movie.
A book in a movie.
That's not set in the 1800s. Yeah. Wild.
Yes. So then we have some more then there's a press conference. And she gives a statement, and it basically gives a message, like, of comfort to the families. Like, I have every reason. And this would, like, how... Why would the police ever allow this? It seemed pretty wild to me. But she's reassuring the families that their daughters are probably alive.
Yeah.
Okay. And sends a message to Casanova and saying, listen, I'm the only one who broke your rules. None of the other victims, she doesn't say victims, none of these other women did. I'm the one that did this. Don't take any of your anger out on them. Which, that's cool. Yeah. Like, that was cool of her, I thought.
Yeah.
And they, of course, have said no questions, and then everyone's trying to pelt her with questions.
And I think it might have happened before or right after the conference, but Cross is able to confirm with Kate that Naomi was among the women with her in that underground holding.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, that happens in the hospital when he's talking to her in, like, the hospital bed, I believe.
Yes, before the press conference, because she wakes up and he's like, hey. And then he does touch her forehead again. Just for good measure. It's weird because when, like, she's, like, in the hospital bed, it feels like he's checking her temperature.
Yeah, a little bit.
Like Little House of the Prairie style.
Well, I think he interviews her, like, once she's out.
Right.
Where he's trying to do, like, a psychological profile of her and, you know, her state of being by, like, questioning, like, what she remembers hearing, what, you know, if she remembered smelling anything, and, like, really, like, just trying to walk her through step by step.
She's having some flashbacks, and really she keeps emphasizing, it's like, I was in this dark place with these dark rooms, and then I saw light, and then there was a forest. That's it.
Yeah.
That's really it. And then we get a cut back to that horrifying compound where he has the women, and you hear Naomi giving basically a violin concert for
and
them.
the other girls.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the other girls are there too.
Who are all in chairs tied to them.
Yeah.
In this, like, main room, you know.
Yeah.
That has, like, a staircase that leads to another level. And we get a little bit more of, like, the compound. Also, when she's escaping, there's, like, multiple tunnels, and it's very confusing.
Yeah. It's like,
and she barely makes it out because she just follows the light of, like, so it's clearly underground.
And I tried to find out if the actress Gina Rivera, who plays Naomi, actually plays the violin. She does not, but she is a professionally and classically trained dancer.
Oh, fantastic.
Oh. She should have been in the Murder, She Wrote episode.
She should have.
Oh boy, we'll get into it.
But I found it so interesting that, like, they picked her to play Naomi Cross, because we also see a brief cameo of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air's Tatiana Ali as Naomi's sister, who I think maybe says a word in the film, and it was just surprising that they didn't. And I'm sure, like, she had a longer scene that was just cut for time.
Yeah, probably.
It was surprising that they didn't go with, like, a name, because, like, this is, like, a year after Fresh Prince went off the air, so it's like she's still known, and they didn't go with her for, like, a bigger part.
So when I watched this, it was the light of day, and I don't have curtains. I do have blinds, but they don't block out all the sunlight, and so all of the sun was, like, just beaming into my living room and at my television, and this is a very dark movie. Like,
visibly.
Yeah, like, there's just, I tried different settings on my remote, but there were just things that I didn't see. So, I heard the whole thing, but my goodness.
Sure.
So, yes, I do recommend darkness so you can actually visually see it, because it is just, it's so hard to see the whole thing if there's light streaming in from outside. Oh, sorry. Right before this, and it's called Sistol. Sistol.
Yes, Sistol.
Yeah, so there's...
Sistol and Ebert.
There is an online database where this guy... basically, it's a DEA database where Alex Cross can access it, I guess, because he's FBI.
Because he's a
or whatever, he's working with
forensic psychologist. Like, he's able to...
Sure.
Yeah, because he's Washington Police Department.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he is able to access it and look for who bought this stuff recently. And, you know, there are doctors who very legitimately probably could have bought it. So that doesn't, you know, raise any bells. But he reveals a little bit later, I'll just kind of sum it up right now, he reveals a little bit later to Kate, who is a doctor, of course, that there was a plastic surgeon who bought some of the stuff, like a lot of the stuff, actually. And that doesn't make any sense because it's not used in any plastic surgery. So, but yes, then we're walking through the woods and trying to get more out of, you know, like where this place might be. And Ashley Judd is, Dr. Kate is taking them through, and they're looking around.
Yeah, and it's kind of bupkis.
Yeah, they don't really find what they're looking for, because she keeps like wanting them to look for a house, and they're like, no, like there's like, we've checked like the aerial views of the property, we've had people walk through, like there's no house. And I think this is where she also talked about like how she heard the constant flow of water.
I think there was a scene previous where they like get a map out and they're like, this is where she was found, so how many yards, and like they really go into like, it's got to be in this area.
Well, sure, yeah, and that makes complete sense, but it's like, why can't we find this place if it's right in this area?
But this is also it didn't happen
Absolutely.
earlier. It happens during the scene where we talk about the Sistol and the plastic surgeon, because he talks to Kate about it, and she asks him who it is. He gives the name William Rudolph, I think. And then she asks if he's out in California, but he was raised in Durham. And then they start talking about like whether or not this person is bi-coastal.
Right.
And Cross is like, that's an interesting way to put it, because it's something like the way the timing worked out between when these women were kidnapped, and there's also someone on the West Coast they find that is going by the name the Gentleman Caller.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like one does something and then the other commits a crime. Like,
yeah, they're parallel.
Yeah, there's kind of like a ping pong kind of deal going on.
Yeah, and Alex's theory is that he's like compulsively doing it, that he can't help himself, so he's like doing it all the time between the two. It's one guy going back and forth. That's his working theory.
They have gone to California. Cross and Kate go to California, where they meet Detective John Sampson, who is a pretty prolific character in the Alex Cross books, this series. They don't really use him too much in this film. But they are, like, Cross and Sampson used to work together. And that's why they link up with him while he's out there. And that's where we also are introduced to Henry Castillo, but played by Jeremy Piven.
Can I tell you? When they introduced this character, and we'll get into it later, I was like, oh, he's gonna die. He's like, I pegged him like, oh, something's gonna happen to him. Just like immediately I knew. I was like, oh, nope. I'm so sorry, Jeremy Piven.
I'm not.
Not coming out of this one.
I'm not.
You're not sorry, Tyler?
Yeah, no. Because it was one of those things of like, why introduce a new character now? Like, oh yeah, he's. Anyway,
That's fair.
Okay. But they go on a little bit of an investigation, and they have to be kind of hush hush about it because it's not really sanctioned. Isn't this the one? Or
no, it's not at all. He had to pull in a lot of.
It's not
favors to get
sanctioned,
this
and
done.
they have to be super stealthy because Kate is involved, and if he sees Kate, everything's blown up.
So then they start following Randolph. That's his name. Randolph?
Right.
Yes. Who is played by
Rudolph.
Rudolph, sorry. Yes. Who is played by the guy who plays the president in Scandal.
Tony Goldwyn,
Tony
who
Goldwyn.
is also the voice of Tarzan in Disney's Tarzan.
He is?
Oh.
Yep.
And he has this little weird cabin house thing in the woods.
Yeah, I think Kate remarks on the fact that, back in the woods, aren't we?
They see him, loading the car with,
Oh, right. Because he's like, what do you think he's doing? It's like, I think he's preparing to murder someone.
Have you ever thought about working at Home Depot and...
Oh, yeah.
and finding, watching someone buy, garbage bags and shovels and things like
And that's
that.
why I
and,
would only work for Lowe's. Lowe's, where the murderers don't go.
Yeah, it's because the prices are too high, Tyler.
And also...
But yeah, I've thought about that a lot, actually.
Yeah.
If you just see someone, buying a bunch of bleach and other chemicals and then also trash bags, and it's like, oh, either you have a skunk problem or
You're going to do a murder.
And I wonder,
I
if
think
they
about this all
have,
the time.
protocols in place. I'm sure, there has to be, a limit on the amount that they can buy at one Home Depot. So they have to go, you know what I mean?
Sir,
there
this isn't
has
a
to be,
Costco.
protocols in place. Or,
Certain things.
see something,
There
say
must
something
be.
type of thing where, they, need to, log,
Yeah.
this customer made, this purchase at this time at our store.
But,
imagine
there's just...
being a murderer and getting caught because you used, your discount card
Because you bought too many trash bags?
at a hardware store. Yeah. He's like, well, that's $137. Oh, wait, I get a coupon. I gotta get those points.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
It's like one
In
of
a way,
those...
lawn work is murder because you're killing plants. Let's talk about it, folks.
But yeah, it's like one of those which one's which things. And you just get a list of stuff they bought at Home Depot, and you have to pick lawn work, murder.
Yeah.
Lawn work,
Yeah.
murder.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised. It's basically
Where would
the
you
same.
hide a body?
So then, yes, they do follow him to a club where he starts talking to a pretty blonde lady and kind of moving in on her. And Ashley Judd gets real creeped out. Oh, she's in the car with Jeremy Piven, who is boring her to tears.
Yeah.
With sports.
Or
And
just by,
he's like,
being Jeremy Piven.
being Jeremy Piven. Yeah. And finally she's like, this is stupid. And she walks inside. And they're like, oh boy. Well, I guess let's make the best out of this. And then basically Alex Cross is like, so what do you think? And she's like, yep. That's
him. That's the man.
That is the guy.
And he walks out with the blonde woman, I should say, with really close to him, and Alex Cross is like, just stay still, and just pivots his body to block the view. I was like, there was a moment I'm like, don't do the kissing thing that happens in so many action movies where it's like, oh, we gotta hide, quick, kiss me. That thing. I was like, I swear, if that happens in this movie, I will
that's
stop
something.
watching.
Yeah,
And
that's something that I think was purposely not done. I remember it being a big thing with the Pelican Brief. the film version, rather, the Pelican Brief, because Denzel Washington's character and Julia Roberts' character are supposed to, at some point, kiss, and he was just very much famously was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be a black man kissing a white woman because that's going to turn white men away from going to see this film. So we do have like this period of time where like that's kind of not done with lead black actors and lead white actresses, at least for like a period of time in the 90s.
Right. And I think that, if I may, Tristan, guess what you meant was not that it was a black actor and a white actress, but the fact that it is just like this kind of working relationship does not need to have a romance involved.
Right, I understood that as well.
Yeah, and also it's corny.
Oh, okay.
Just for our listeners.
Yeah. Oh, if anyone knows me, I hate interracial couples. Like, it's not like I'm dating a black
That's exactly what someone who had a problem with it would say. I bet you have black friends too, Tristan.
I did at one point turn to Christina. I was like, what if this was like me trying to get over my own
Immersion
racism
therapy?
by exposure therapy? Like, what if that was the whole reason I started dating you, and then I accidentally fell in love?
Oh boy.
Like, in the worst rom-com imaginable.
But they do follow Tony Goldwyn to and the blonde to his creepy cabin, where you then start hearing screaming from...
yeah, like immediately.
Yeah.
This boy does not waste his time.
Yeah. No. And then they basically storm in, and as they're storming in, Jeremy Piven gets shot. Oh, well.
Told you.
And then they find the blonde woman with, rope around her wrist. But this clearly did not advance as far as he wanted it to. And so they chase him.
And Kate does a really lovely thing where, like, he's getting away in his car.
Yeah.
And she pulls in front of him, and they have, like, a fender bender, and then so he stops, and he makes eye contact with her, and he's like,
Yeah.
the soldier from the mountain. And then that gives Cross enough time to catch up with him and point a gun at him, like, get out of the car, get out of the car, get out of the car. And instead, he just runs over Cross and bumping him in the side pretty badly.
So this very smooth little stakeout goes pretty bad.
Yeah, did not go well.
No. Dr. Kate is tending to Alex Cross's arm, which got pretty banged, or his side, his ribs. Yeah, that's right. And because he gets hit in the side, and she says, "You really need an X-ray." He's like, "Nah, no thanks."
I'm a man.
So, well, all right.
It's also it could have been a very sensual scene again. Like, they could have had a very... Because he's like, he doesn't have a shirt on.
Right.
And she's like, like, it could have, and they just opted out, which I really much enjoyed. Of like, which is one of those things that always really bothers me about this sort of thing. Is like, people are dying. The stakes are too high. Like, no time for romance, Mr. Jones.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
I
What
do.
you're saying.
But also, the tensions are high, and sometimes a relief of tension, because I do think it happens in the book. Morgan Freeman is like a good 30 years older than Alex Cross should be. Yeah.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Alex should be around the same age as Kate, maybe a few years older, but like they're like around the same age. Like I remember like looking at reviews at the time, they were like, yeah, he's way too old for this part. He's incredible, but he's too old as the character is written.
Okay. But I appreciate, like, that's a thing that I don't mind the translation of.
For sure.
You know?
I didn't have a problem
Like,
with him, but yeah.
But some people did. So basically it's like, you're going to get in a lot of trouble and no one's going to really talk about the lady you saved. They're just going to talk about all the things that went terribly with this with this little unsanctioned investigation.
And then I think next we go to
Yeah.
Rudolph's house to have like a look around to see if, you know.
Yeah, we get the FBI guy
Yes.
in this scene who shows up with to Rudolph's house, and they're doing an investigation. And he really lays into Alex and is like, "This is huge. This is a huge mistake that you."
Kyle Craig is the name of the FBI agent, and he also is quite a fixture of the Alex Cross book series.
Cool.
Yes. So Rudolph has a ton of like creepy photos in his home.
Yes, and they're in a freezer. I hardly know where.
There's one on the wall.
There's a bunch on the wall, and there's a bunch on the wall also, I believe, in the freezer.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Yes, it's like the door to the freezer, and you have the inside of the door is open at first, so it seems like it's... But yeah, and he's got...
And there's a bunch of cut-up feet. There's a bunch of cut-up feet in the bag.
Yeah, and like newspaper clippings about the
Even
gentleman caller.
Tarantino's like, this is too much.
Yeah. So he has pictures, and he does have pictures of Kate and whatnot hanging in this creepy freezer.
And even just like a little bit before this, Kate goes up to Alex and was like, "This seems too cold. It's not like him." They find newspaper clippings like of both sets.
Right.
Yeah. And from this, they somehow deduce that there's two people.
Right. Like we were... Yeah. Because when she's saying, like, this seems too cold, it's basically like, okay, based on this psychological profile, like, this is a different psychological profile than Casanova. Like, yes, this seems related, but it is not the same guy doing this. This is two guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're competing, which is disturbing.
Yeah, it's really disturbing.
They're about to go back to Durham because they find the photograph of that wily, mean, nasty professor dude.
Yeah.
So they immediately roll up like every black and white, that they have at their disposal, rolls up to this man's house.
And this is where Brian Cox gets his 3 lines.
So they find, like, lots of S&M stuff in this creepy professor's house.
They truly do.
Which, like, gosh, people like to be real suspicious of people with S&M stuff in their homes. But some people just like consensual S&M. But I guess when your photo is in the ice room of a suspected serial killer, they gotta ask you about your ball gag and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's more the issue.
I think that's...
But they arrest him, and Alex is interviewing
And it's
him.
very public, much to the chagrin of Alex Cross. He's very upset that it's been so widely publicized, because if they're wrong, they now know that, everyone in Durham is now, like, really... like, it's captured so much attention right now. And that's not the way they wanted things to go down.
Yeah, exactly.
Not at all.
So they interview this guy, and he does turn out to be a creep. Like, he just seems like a jerk. But he also does seem to be having consensual sex with all of these women.
Yeah.
And, that's just the kink. Which is...
It's just...
fine.
Surprise, an older man likes younger women. Like, surprise.
And then he starts talking about possible sex that he had with Naomi to Alex. Yeah. And Alex loses his cool.
Yeah.
Oh, boy, does he.
And he does punch him in the face.
which is satisfying.
And then we are back to the dungeon. And Naomi is being taken from the room or cell that she's being held in. And it's much different this time around. There's like a flashlight in her face, and we find that it's Rudolph.
He's made his way back to the dungeons, and then he assembles the women again for a concert.
before that, we get a scene. Dr. Kate is listening to a tape recorder, and then basically we just see Rudolph come in and take Naomi out of the room with the flashlight. And then we see Kate, Alex Cross, and the boyfriend of Naomi are at the library, and they're doing some research. It looks like they're looking into the maps, and they're trying to figure out what is around this forest where she got out.
In that scene, it turns out there's a, they go, okay, it's got to be this X radius, because this is where you found in the river. What's there? Oh, there's this old plantation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Which begins to, as Tyler mentioned before, put together like, oh, that's why there's these tunnels. And that's why, because he's like, here are the slave quarters, here are the stables, here is the main house.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And they're all, like, it's a huge compound.
Right. It does not explain all of the candelabras, but certainly some of them. Then you see Rudolph yelling at Naomi because of the way she's playing Bach, and it's definitely not the same feel as our Casanova.
And then Casanova is like, no, she only plays for me, my angel of music. And he's hidden in the shadows, and they get into an argument. During this time, also, the Alex and Kate, and there's one other person, right?
The boyfriend.
The boyfriend.
So.
The boyfriend. They're all searching the grounds.
Mm-hmm.
And Alex finds this cellar door, and that's chained up, and he shoots the lock.
Yeah.
And then both Casanova and this other schmuck, they go, a gunshot. And so Casanova says, like, get out of here, take the stairs, it's fine. Then Alex goes and finds all the women tied to the chairs. Mm-hmm. And then he's like, oh, the guy isn't here, so we better... Whoosh. He goes out and he starts looking for the guy, but then he sends Kate and the boyfriend to get the women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he begins to chase down Rudolph.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this long chase scene where he goes on the highway and there's some cars and there's a triple fake out with all these trucks. And then Rudolph shoots at him from across the street. And then eventually he tracks him down and shoots him. And, like, he's not dead. And he's trying to get information out of him. And he won't cooperate.
So then we see the FBI coming in, finding all sorts of creepy evidence. So much. Like, another room, like the freezer full of newspaper clippings and whatnot, except it is much, shall we say, warmer feeling.
Yeah.
It has, like, scrolls with women's names on them and all sorts of, like, creepy stuff.
Love notes and so forth. And they note that his fingerprints are all over this thing.
Yeah.
So they're going to find him pretty soon. I think this is also a good place to take an ad break. Hey everybody, thanks for listening. Just as a reminder, we are on the Scavengers Network. You can go to scavengersnetwork.com and check out all of their great content. They've been doing live streams a lot lately. I've been on a couple, not just video games, but also like cooking and a bunch of other stuff. They also have a bunch of podcasts, like Morgan Needs a Podcast, which is, the premise is, I believe that you pitch a podcast to
Morgan.
Yeah, to figure out what her next one will be. So she's just, like, constantly trying to find a new podcast to make, which is fun. Also, obviously, Historical Hotties. Both Melissa and I have been on that one. And then you got...
State Your Case.
State Your Case. Yes. Spooky Spouses. A bunch of them. I cannot stress enough. There's just almost... I was going to say too many. There's not too many, but there's a lot.
Hello, I'm Tyler Riley. You may be wondering what I'm doing here this afternoon. And that is to tell you about a brand new opportunity that I'd like you to be a part of. You see, for as little as $1 a month, you can help feed three amateur detectives. At that level, you'll receive access to bonus content and episodes. At a $3 level, you'll be able to receive early access to all of our shows, plus bonus episodes and content. And for $10 a month, you can place an ad for your business during the show, and also receive early access to all the shows and bonus content. Thank you for your time.
And you put some Sarah McLachlan under that.
And don't forget, you can find us on social media at ADC Pod, wherever you can think of a social media. I mean, we're not on TikTok like the kids, but everywhere else.
Or LinkedIn, like the oldies.
Or where?
LinkedIn.
Oh, no.
So, should I take down our account?
Oh, wait,
yes.
I guess we are on? No, we're not. But yes, at ADC Pod. Make sure to engage with us. We love talking to you. So check all of that out. You can do it from the comfort of your own phone. So we have Naomi recovering in the hospital.
It's very nice.
And Alex...
You know what he does? He puts his hand on her head. His classic move.
But she is very happy to see him, of course. She's very relieved. And he brings her violin. And there's no strings on it. She's like, what the heck is this? Much like the dirty bike that Poirot delivered to.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
But then he bought her brand new strings to string her on her violin.
But we see, like, Alex, like, leaving the hospital, and, like, there's a bunch of reporters, and, like, somebody else, like, taking the questions. He leaves. And then he goes home. He has, like, this conversation with Kate on the phone.
But before that, he sees Detective Nick. What's his last name? I forget.
Oh, Ruskin?
Ruskin, yeah. And they have a little conversation. And shake hands, and he, I believe, signs something. Or he has there's a piece of paper that Nick has signed that he now has in his possession. But then we get a cut to Kate, who is putting on some nice music and pouring herself some wine.
And she's talking to Alex on the phone and invites him over for dinner that evening. He's like, I mean, my niece is, like, getting out of the hospital, I have, like, family commitments. She's like, well, I mean, do what you have to do, but make sure that you're here at my house for dinner tonight. And it's, like, really nice. And she's cooking, and he's like, all right, can you do me a favor? Like, look out your window. Like, are the officers still there? And she's like, yes, they're still there. Like, I'm fine. I feel all right.
So then Officer Nick, they hang up, and Officer Nick Ruskin comes to her door, and she's like, oh, hey, come on in. You want to help me make dinner? And he's like, maybe, yeah, sure, why not? And she's being very inviting. And then you see Alex Cross comparing the note that he had gotten from Nick Ruskin to a note from Casanova to the police.
I should also mention here that Nick has sent the other officers away.
And so as this is all as she is inviting Nick into her home, Alex calls her back.
Two things happen here. Her friend calls and clogs up the phone line, so Alex can't get through. And then she hangs up, and by the time she hangs up, she's turned around to go back to making whatever she's making. Nick has cut the phone line.
Okay, yes, that's what it is.
So he cannot get through to her, and once the phone line is dead, Alex is like, oh no. And he gets in his car, and he goes on over.
And in the meantime, Nick and Kate are making dinner, and she keeps asking him for the sharpest, biggest knife possible.
Yeah.
And it all gets very tense, and he's talking to her about the psychological profile of this murderer, and it gets creepier and creepier and creepier and creepier. And
he's like talking about knowing when like her cycle is and the last time she had sex.
Yeah, based on like her trash. And it then becomes pretty clear that this is exactly what he has done to her.
Yeah. And I would say this. There's something that we did not mention. That Nick has the corniest Southern accent on the face of the planet.
Oh, yes.
And over the course of speaking with her, drops into a standard American accent. Now, here's the thing. Cary Elwes is British. And does a decent job with this standard American. But it still sounds like he's doing an accent. So I was expecting at some point for him to drop a second accent and just be English. And I thought that would have been dope as hell.
But then a struggle starts, and they are beating the hell out of each other. Like, oof. Yeah. It is very upsetting. He basically dares her to stab, because he waits to reveal himself until she has the sharpest, scariest knife in the kitchen in her hand. And he says, okay, stab me. And she goes, okie doke, and stabs him in the stomach. Which is amazing. And so they struggle, and it is pretty long and drawn out. She is holding her own, and unfortunately, he is also doing a pretty good job. He winds up slashing her pretty bad in the forearm. But
not before she has time to handcuff him to the oven.
Yeah, he's trying to handcuff her, but she winds up handcuffing him. And, so she really has to tend to her arm. So she gets a dish towel and to wrap it up to try to stop the loss of blood, and that's really what is occupying her. And then while he is attached to the stove, he like pulls it out of the wall so that the gas line is exposed. He's a strong man.
He's a police officer.
Yeah.
And he's also using the wall as leverage to move everything.
Yeah. So he gets that out of the wall, the stove out of the wall. So there's gas like flowing through the apartment, or the house, I should say. And he pulls out his lighter. Just at that moment, Alex Cross comes in, and Alex aims a gun at Nick, and does his negotiation tactics with him, and Officer Nick is, of course, saying, "I know exactly what you're doing." And he's like, "Yeah, that's right."
Yeah, which in this scene he says Nick like 7 times, and I'm like, why is this dialogue so bad? And then, of course, over the court, like, Nick says, yeah, he's trying a technique, and the first one is like using the person's name. And I'm like, okay, that explains it, because he's like, put the lighter down, Nick, you're fine, Nick, Nickelodeon.
Yes. So he does end up putting the gun down to try and like get him to put the lighter down.
Because also he makes the point of like, he's like, what are you gonna do? Shoot me? He's like, no, with a muzzle flash? Are you kidding me? I would also blow us up. So let's just have a conversation.
Right, exactly. At a certain point, he grabs the gun back up through the carton of milk he's put it behind.
Yeah.
And shoots him in the head.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's this slow-mo, several angle shot of the milk flying everywhere.
Yeah.
And then, doesn't it just cross-dissolve and it's credits?
No.
Okay, what happens
He goes
next?
over to Kate and, like, checks on her, embraces her, and that's when credits hit. Like, we do see those that those two are okay.
And then, then it's credits.
Which is absolutely wild that there's no, like, epilogue. I was very startled by, like, oh, it's just done.
Yeah, which I actually appreciate.
Yeah.
Because it's like, what else did we need to do, really?
Yeah. At this point, it was, like, 2.5 hours, right? Or something?
No, it's still under
155. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, gentlemen, what did you think of this movie?
I would like to hear from Tyler as a fan of this property, what he thought of this film.
I'm definitely a fan of the Alex Cross series. I read, I think, up until Double Cross, which I think was like the 12th or 13th book in the series. And this was really what got me into series. Like, I wasn't a big reader until I picked up Along Came a Spider. So this really hooked me on reading. So I have like a really strong connection to Alex Cross and like these characters because that's my like reading foundation as a young person into adulthood. And this is the type of books that, you know, I tend to gravitate towards. That being said, as far as the film, and we're doing this out of 5 or 10. I can't remember what we do for films.
I believe we do 10 for films.
Yes, we do.
I give it a 5 out of 10 for a film. Like, the bones of the story was there, but they took a lot of the heart and the true aspects of how this all unfolds, like, kind of out of it. And I'm still, like, not quite sure what the thought process was in those regards. We lose a lot of subplots from the novel that were originally in the book. And we also lose a notable character, Beth Lieberman, who is a writer for the Los Angeles Times, who was the one that was tracking the West Coast, the Gentleman Caller.
Okay.
So we get this back and forth between what's going on in the East Coast, and we also get like Beth's kind of perspective in a few chapters as well. Because and the way that they kind of come together isn't because of Rudolph, really. I mean, Beth like starts to put it together that it could be Rudolph. I believe due to one of the conditions of the Gentleman Caller, they had to publish these letters in the Los Angeles Times. Or else, or else something bad would happen to these women.
Okay, very much like...
So they keep publishing, and one of the published letters was about Naomi, which catches their attention and brings them out west.
Okay.
That makes way more sense.
Yeah, that does make more sense.
And yeah, like, we have like this really strong female character. I mean, Beth does end up getting killed in the book. Which is unfortunate, but you have like this really sharp woman. It's because like she got way too close before backup arrived.
Yeah.
But yeah, we just get a lot more history in the book of both the Gentleman Caller and Casanova. Okay. And we get to hear from a lot more women in the book as well, which we definitely miss in the film translation.
That's interesting. In as much as I was noticing how many women were on screen, but like they don't have a lot to say.
Right.
Yeah.
They're kind of treated as set dressing.
And Along Came a Spider was the first book, but it ends up being the second film in this series. And I feel like that did a much better job.
Okay.
Of staying to the book, though there were some significant changes made to that film as well.
Yeah, I think that I would give it something similar, maybe a 6. The actors are very, very good. There's really good performances by everybody. But yeah, even though I have not read the book, it does feel like there is something missing out of it. Like, it feels not sensational. It's not quite the right word. Salacious. There we go. That's the word I'm looking for. In a way that we don't really get the as much of a payoff to make up for it. If that makes any sense. And I feel like those other female characters would have really helped that, because the thing that helps this film the most, I mean, other than Alex Cross being wonderful, because he's a great character, is the fact that Kate is so fantastic. And she's, every time she is kicking butt, it's like, oh, thank goodness. Because that's what I personally want out of the movie. I just want these ladies to to be fighting them. Like, that's what's satisfying to me about it.
Sure.
And, oh gosh, there's one line that happens that I thought about, and I didn't write it down. I should have written it down. I should always write things down. But that she says to him, like, Kate says to Alex something like, you think just because I didn't get raped that I wasn't,
that I don't feel for these women.
Or, yeah, but it's something else. And it's a weird line. Like, I thought about it for a while, and it was... It just rang very... very odd to me.
Mm-hmm.
And... I don't know. It rang not hollow, but it just made it... Yeah, it was a little... There was some gratuitous... It felt a little gratuitous, in a way.
Sure. 2 out of 10. Big stinker. It has a 30% on Rotten Tomatoes. I agree with that. It certainly is a movie. It was definitely filmed. Morgan Freeman is definitely in it, playing, I think, a very boring character. We do not see him have much humanity over the course of it other than his interactions with people. I really needed to see him outside of him being a detective or what, psychologist. So I could really get on board with him. I would have liked to see him interact with his family, so the stakes of getting to Naomi are higher. Because, obviously it's like, it feels like you as an audience member obviously are trying to be on the side of the police because by virtue of the crime being so horrendous, but the personal stakes were emphasized by him saying it a lot, and we don't I think we don't see it enough. Morgan is certainly there. He's certainly doing his job as an actor. He's fine. Ashley Judd's quite good in it. At no point did I believe Carrie Elwes's accent, which is one of the reasons that it tipped me off of like, oh, he's probably in character doing a bit. I sized him up and predicted that it was going to be either him or the old professor, but then I was like, the professor's too obvious. I thought the switcheroo of having someone on the East Coast was interesting, but it did bog things down story-wise, and I would have liked for them to justify that more. The way this is shot is insane. It is very indicative of the times. There's a lot of slow motion and a lot of smash cuts. It's very corny in that way, which I enjoyed. I thought it was very interesting to watch. But overall, I was not on board with this movie. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to this man. I do not know this man.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a lot of strong feelings about this movie as I watch it. I would love to read the novels to see if the issues I have with this movie is like different. I would love to read the novel to see if it's a matter of this film specifically, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. That does make sense.
That makes sense.
But yeah, this movie, and that was the thing as well, is this movie is at no point enjoyable to watch for me. It was disturbing and also not interesting enough to justify being disturbing to me, if that makes sense. I was uncomfortable the entirety.
I think that's what I was trying to hit on a little bit when I was saying it's like what I wanted was for basically for any of the women to be kicking butt for most of the movie. And when I got that, I was happy. But one thing that I will say is that I kept thinking how it felt like the killers and the MO was a combination of multiple real life serial killers that I have heard about, and in such a way that made it so bananas that it was extremely unbelievable.
Sure, yeah. I don't think they justify it at any point.
Yeah,
I think it was just a poor place for them to start from. Why, this is the second book. Why wouldn't you just start with the first?
Sure,
I
yeah.
mean, yeah. I think about that every time they adapt Narnia, too.
Oh, sure. Right, and it's Lion the Witch and the
yeah.
Wardrobe instead of...
Yeah.
Comparable, obviously.
All right. So I call this very long meeting of the Amateur Detective Club to a close.